What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and another Outriders video. As promised, today we're going to look at the Worldslayer version of AP Speedrun Pyro, a build that I love a lot. Those of you that are fans of the channel will know this is a build of Pyromancer that I'm a huge fan of. A couple of days back I made a kind of a test video where I used the old vanilla armor. By the way, this video is linked in the description below. I used the old vanilla armor to test whether this build would still be viable in expeditions at Apocalypse tier 40. I was pleased with the results, and this armor performed well enough with the old vanilla gear, which is actually missing 5 additional mod slots, which of course you get 1 per armor piece, that I decided to update this build to the Worldslayer version of it. In other words, exactly the same 10 mods that we have on those other 5 pieces, those vanilla pieces, but then adding 5 additional mods on there to essentially round out any possible weaknesses that the build can potentially have right now. So what we have here is we have Speedrun Pyro brought up to Worldslayer with Akari used as a set here instead of just this vanilla purple pieces. I think it'll take me a super duper long time to farm out actually 5 pieces of gear like which are purple like the original Speedrun Pyro was. I'm kind of like just letting that brew in the background, so if I see these purple pieces dropping, I keep an eye out for them and I keep them. Who knows, 17 decades from now, when I actually get that and the RNG pays off, we might actually be able to see a all purple version of this build. But what we have here today is what we're looking at here. So this build obviously performs exceptionally well in expeditions, and this is basically what it's designed for. It's designed for fast clearing large groups of enemies and progressing through these rooms very quickly. Now, once you get to actual bosses or anything like that, like for instance Dr. D, you can blast them down with your weapons and a combination of your abilities, or your skills rather, and so they also don't really present a challenge. Where this build does suffer, just like with its vanilla component or its vanilla partner, is dealing with things like the second arbiter or basically any of the really big bosses in trials. I think definitely the game is setting into a kind of meta right now where you have builds that are exceptionally good at expeditions but maybe not so good at bosses, and then you have builds that are exceptionally good at bosses but not so good at fast moving through rooms, and then you have those rare diamond in the rough builds that are good at both. Now, those ones that are good at both are super special, super rare, and I think that some classes really only have 1, possibly 2 of those available, and that is definitely not what this build is. You can kill the second arbiter with this, but you are going to be celebrating 2 birthdays in the time that it takes you to down the arbiter, so I would absolutely encourage you to only use this build if you want to farm expeditions, you want to go quick through that. This is essentially a room deleter, so as long as you are using the combo right, and as long as you are applying Ash Blast and then Overheat while having the effects of reload boost from volcanic rounds on there and setting things on fire with your weapons, you're going to be able to drop massive amounts of enemies with relative ease by essentially just hitting that combo the whole time, and that's basically it. And when it comes to the actual build itself, and I don't want to waste too much of your time here, because this build I've not only featured a lot on the channel before, but again, as I've mentioned, it's literally taking the 10 mods that we have in the vanilla version and just adding 5 on. So I will discuss the ones which I additionally added on, but as always, we'll start with the weapons, we'll talk about the armor and the mods on there, we'll talk about the skills and the rotation, we'll look at the class tree, we'll talk about the PAX choices that you should be picking for this, which is interesting because that's of course something that wasn't around in vanilla, and last but not least, I can make some recommendations as to which Ascension points you should be looking at first. Also, please do exclude the, or rather disregard the transmog that I have on here. This is of course a Akari 3-piece, and I'll explain that as we get to the armor. But first of all, with the weapons, these are the same weapons that I used in that previous video. So we have a Funeral Pyre on here, which is perfect for this setup because you're able to deal damage to large clumps of enemies with the combination of Shadow Comet and Claymore Torrent coming from hip firing the weapon and having your pellets of your shotgun hit as many targets as possible, which will proc that effect multiple times. A fantastic add-on to this as our 3rd slot is Weakness Trap, which again just accentuates that whole AoE clearance of the weapon, and it's just a fantastic weapon to have for this kind of setup. Then for our reload, meta, of course, the original build of this, as well as the vanilla one, which I produced a couple of days back, uses a Moaning Winds Clip Combustion Radiation Splash weapon to essentially, you know, reload and deal all of that additional damage to enemies that we run through. So your chunkier enemies that don't die to your combo, you can use this to essentially kill them. Now, back in the days, back in vanilla Outriders, of course, these effects would spread across 2 weapons. So people would have, you know, like something like Moaning Winds and, you know, Radiation Splash on the Animal, and then they would have Clip Combustion and, you know, something else on the pistol, and you would switch between both of those to get both those effects to fire off. This just makes it super easy because you have all of these effects on one weapon, so you only have to do one switch, and so it's just hella easy to do that. Now, because we have these top 2 weapons, we don't really need to talk about pistols, but what you can do if you want to kind of make the rotation a little bit spicier is you can include a pistol that sets enemies on fire, whichever way you use to do that. Like for instance here, you see I use Firestorm. Now the reason being that a lot of our combo depends on enemies being on fire, and since we don't actually use any skills per se that set things on fire, we have to depend on the volcanic rounds. Well, volcanic round sets things on fire, but of course we try to load off of volcanic rounds to get reload boost. So whatever we don't get to set on fire with those first 1 or 2 or 3 shots of volcanic rounds before we switch out the rotation, those guys are not going to be on fire. So anything else that you can do to set them on fire will mean that your combo does more damage to them as well. The point being that you can hit them with a Firestorm, or you can melee them or something like that. The main issue, I would say, that where this would come into play is if you're fighting tougher enemies, something like Dr. D or so on. Champions, elites, they die to the combo by default, so it's really not an issue. So when we get over to the armor itself, now as mentioned, we are actually using 3-piece Akari. I have the Heatseeker's helmet on here though, because a lot of the mods on the headpiece of the Akari are of course suited towards Heatwave, and we're not using Heatwave on here. So we have Empowerment, Phoenix Surge, and Death Sentence on here. All 3 of these mods, essentially, you know, they work on making our combo stronger. Of course, the substats that we want on our gears, we want anomaly power on as many pieces as we can, because the more anomaly, the stronger the combo. And we also want cooldown reduction, so we can get that combo firing as soon as possible or as often as possible. And then after that, the sky's the limit. Status power is really good because, of course, that helps your Ash Blast last longer, so enemies stay ashen for longer, which means they're not dealing damage to you and you can run through them. Or you could have something like Skills Life Leech, which is good because that of course keeps you alive. As you're firing off your combo the whole time, you'll constantly be giving yourself life and you won't actually be dying. But Empowerment, Phoenix Force, and Death Sentence, all 3 of these mods, they enhance your combo with Ash Blast. So Empowerment makes your Ash Blast deal more damage to enemies that are hit by it. Phoenix Force consumes statuses as Overheat does, but gives you additional anomaly power for each status that is consumed for 8 seconds, and this can stack up to 10 times, so you can get quite a bit of additional anomaly power there. And then Death Sentence, of course, is basically a debuff. That stuff that you Ash Blast, they take additional weapon and anomaly damage for 5 seconds. So again, all 3 these very important for the combo. Our first piece of Akari is of course the chest piece. Now, what is of course important to notice here is, guys, we are not actually benefiting from the Akari set bonus. The reason why I took Akari is because that gave me easy access to some of the mods that I needed. That's the only reason. If you find any other Pyromancer armor pieces that give you access to the same mods that we're talking about here, feel free to use that, because we're not using Heatwave, so we're not benefiting from the effect of Akari. Akari is just giving us a lot of the mods straight rolled on the armor already that we need for this setup, so it's just easier to farm. That's really the only reason. So no need to discuss the set bonus. This could be literally 5 pieces of purple. In fact, if you could get 5 pieces of purple gear to drop with this combination of mods, you're far better off for that matter. Now on here, on the chest piece, we have Detonator, which decreases our overheat cooldown by 50%. Fantastic. And we have Reload Boost on here, which is the only volcanic rounds mod that we have on here. Now this used to be the main thing that drove the strength of this build, because this used to be a lot stronger, but ever since the Worldslayer patch, when Worldslayer came out, of course they nerfed this, so it's far less potent than it used to be. Nonetheless, 25% anomaly damage is still fairly decent, and it gives you this buff for 10 seconds when you cycle off of volcanic rounds. Captain Hunter is on here because trash folds like fucking laundry to this build, but of course captains, elites, and bosses is where you want to get a little bit of more damage in there. Then our pants is our second piece of the Akari. This rolls with Anomaly Echo, which is fantastic for us. We have Ashen Boost on here, which gives us 12% additional damage to enemies that are ashed. We are constantly ashing enemies. Enemies are constantly under this status, so this helps you to deal more damage to them. And we have Sunburnt on here that says that it increases by a set percentage the damage to enemies that have their statuses consumed by the skill. So again, just a way for you to capitalize on when Overheat actually eats those statuses on the enemy. Then we have a purple piece here for our hands, which has Ash Increase range on here, which is phenomenal. It basically, you know, helps your Ash Blast to reach almost across the arena, almost as far as Overheat does. And we have Unstoppable Force on here because we are using the No Resistance Unstoppable Force combo to give ourselves as much additional anomaly power as we can get. And this is of course because we recycle Armor Piercing into Resistance Piercing and Resistance Piercing into AP. We have Bullet Kindling on here for more damage against enemies that are burnt. That's why I said it's a good idea for you to set tough enemies on fire before you hit them with a combo, or to hit them with a combo, because it's going to deal more damage again. Then on the boots, I'm using Boots of the Reforged. I had Boots of the Akari on here before because that gave me access to Master Consumer, which is of course a very, very powerful mod for Overheat that allows it to consume either burn or ash, but when it consumes both, you actually get a magnified damage effect there of 150%. So Boots of the Reforged gave me access to power assimilation as well. So again, just another way for us to increase our anomaly power for every enemy that's on the screen, specifically enemies that are from the elite variety, so champions, elites, and bosses. Those will actually increase. So if there's 4 or 5 champions elites combination on there, then you're looking at 1.5 million of additional anomaly power, which is fucking phenomenal. And then lastly, as part of that combo, as I mentioned, no resistance against the fortified, because again, we're cycling Armor Piercing into Resistance Piercing and Resistance Piercing into more AP. So when we then get over to the skills and just talking about the rotation, the idea here, the main damage of this build actually comes from the combo which you get from Ash Blast and Overheat, as well as when you hit enemies with Volcanic Round, set them on fire, and then switch off, so you get the anomaly damage boost, and then you run up to them and you also do your weapon cycling combo. That's also going to make those mods hit a lot more for a lot more damage. Now again, like I said, when you start out, and our cooldowns are super low, as you can see, so you'll get your volcanic rounds back quite often, especially once we look at the PAX choices, because that's going to make a difference as well. But you're going to switch on your volcanic rounds and you're going to pump 2 or 3 or 4 rounds at the most difficult to kill enemies. So like for instance, if the room opens up, there's a champion and a bunch of trash around, you switch on volcanic rounds, you hit the boss like 2 or 3 times to make sure that he's on fire, and you pull down the combo on him, you rotate your weapons out, and you cast your combo. You go Ash Blast, and then you wait a while for the ash to coat everything, and you go Overheat. Now if you want to get more spicy, what you can do is you can time this in running. So as you run into the room and you see the boss there, you hit him with your main shotgun, so that you set him on fire, and you proc the abilities coming down. And then as you run past him, you switch your weapons out, because then you're going to run past him and hit him with the combo from the Animoy. All of those mods are going to deal the AoE damage. That's probably going to kill that guy outright. And then at this point in time, you cycle your combo Ash Blast, wait, everything's coated, Overheat, and it kills the entire room. And you essentially just rinse, repeat this every room that you go into. I'm sure that I don't really need to explain the intricacies of, Speedrun Pyro. I think it's a build that's not only very popular, but has almost been seen by everybody. So nonetheless, let me know in the comments down below if you need a little bit more information on how this works, but that's basically it. In a way, it's almost like whack-a-mole, where you are hitting Ash Blast and Overheat as soon as they come off combo every time, because the point is that as long as you have this increased AP damage from volcanic rounds, you are benefiting from additional damage on that combo. Now while you're hitting those things every time they come off cooldown, you keep setting stuff on fire whenever you can, and you keep making sure that you have this AP boost going on. And every tough chunky enemy, you make sure to run past them and hit them with the Animoy reload. That's basically it. And when we go over to the class tree itself, and let me take my face away here because we are going top tree, there are different ways in which you can play this, but by far the most consistent way is by going top tree, so that you accentuate your damage against enemies that are ashen, because you are constantly applying ash boost, and it just gives you a whole bunch of additional damage against that. Now what you're going to be doing is you're going to be running along here and just making sure that you pick up all of the nodes which give you more damage against Ash. As mentioned, you do want to be getting hot situation, because this means every time when you Ash blast, you actually give yourself a massive anomaly power increase of 45%. And you're also going to be picking up Ashes to Ashes, as well as Hurt Twice as Long, as well as Trial of the Ashes and Marble Orchard. Now all of this is just going to give you additional resistance piercing, as you can see if you follow the path here. But what is super important is that you don't pick up the capstone, because this increases your weapon damage. So this is where you're going to stop. Now once you do that, you're going to be left with 5 points. Now what you do with those 5 points is entirely up to you, but to me it made sense to pick up anomaly power here, get additional damage against marked enemies, more anomaly power here, get some more damage from gifted, and then last but not least get wildfire. The point here is that we get our cooldowns as low as possible, and it is relatively important to have your Ash Blast and Overheat quite close to each other in terms of cooldown, so that there's always an Ash Blast ready for an Overheat, because that's just going to make the combo feel more natural, and it's going to make it easier for you to pull it off. Does it mean that this build can't work with longer cooldowns? Of course it can. It just means that you'll also have a slower speed in clearing. Now when we go over to the PAX tree itself, and I think I can bring back my face, here of course we are going bottom tree, so we get some additional resistance piercing, which for us is more damage because of those 2 mods that we have in our armor. We also get Master Exploder here, which says that it further on increases explosive skill damage is increased by 50% of the resistance piercing. We are stacking resistance piercing, so this is going to increase the damage of our overheats. We do pick up Convection here, which is just an overall way for us to reduce our cooldowns. Of course, Convection took a nerf to the head a while back, so it's not quite as spicy as it used to be. And if it wasn't for that Convection nerf, it meant that we could maybe, for instance, not pick up Wildfire, because we would have more than enough cooldown reduction. But nonetheless, what we then also still do is we go 1 point into Conduction, and we further on reduce our cooldowns by 15%, and that is how I'm able to get such low cooldowns. We also get Backdraft, which says that your anomaly power is increased by 25% for every skill on cooldown. This means that your overheats hit for as hard as possible, because the point is you're going to go volcanic rounds, you're going to shoot twice, 3 times, you're going to cycle off that skill goes on cooldown, you're going to Ash Blast, now that skill's on cooldown, which means your overheat gets the maximum benefit. Now the reason why we don't pick up any of the capstones is because they don't really help us. Arsonist is just going to give us even more cooldown reduction, which if you run this, you'll see you don't really need that. It doesn't really give you more in the pocket. And for instance, having Backdraft is more, is more beneficial. Trigger sequence could work, and over time you'll notice that every 2nd or 3rd overheat starts hitting a little bit more spicy, and if you can time it right and everything like that, then you could probably play around getting some nice big sweeps with those overheats. But overall, I think waiting for the 2nd or the 3rd overheat to kill something instead of just hitting it flat with like 4 overheats and then it dies is probably just the lazier, more efficient version of it. And then last but not least, Burnt Offerings doesn't really work for us here, because we actually consume our burn statuses, those that we apply, and so enemies are never burning for quite that long to actually benefit from this at all. Now when we get over to the Ascension Points, of course your main stop is going to be around Anomaly. You're going to put your first 10 points into Anomaly damage, your next 10 points into Anomaly power, and then to empower your combo of armor piercing to resistance piercing to AP, you're going to put your next points into resistance pierce and armor pierce. After that, you can definitely dip into cooldown reduction, and you can obviously get yourself some additional damage against elites or taking less damage from elites. If you struggle with survivability at any point, think about investing into health and armor here, but generally speaking, due to the super low cooldowns that your skills are on, it means that you'll always be applying damage to enemies, which means you'll always be getting HP. And that right there is the build as well as the video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. I wanted to build this for my pyro, first of all, just because of the nostalgia of it, and secondly, because I think the master of speedrun at the moment right now is definitely Techno with Cold Snap Tech. But this is an alternative to playing that, and certainly super interesting to play this alongside Cold Snap Tech. It produces some insane sweeps across the map as you're moving, and it's just overall it's just hilarious to see these two running together. So if you've got a buddy and you want to try it out, definitely have him run Cold Snap Technomancer and run this alongside that, and I think you'll be surprised to see just how cute it gets. But again, let me know in the comments down below what you would change with this if you're planning on building something like this. At this moment in time, I think people are struggling with the motivation to keep on playing the game. I think, you know, unfortunately Outriders again going into a little bit of a dip, but I always like to hear you guys feedback and what you think about it. But that's it. Again, thank you so much. It's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.